Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode 56, and on today's episode, I speak with Heidi McCahan about using dictation to write a couple of novels a year, writing and selling category romance, and her interesting journey to becoming a Harlequin author. Heidi also has a really informative blog post that breaks down more basic tips and tricks for getting started in dictation, and I made sure to use the episode as more of a companion piece. I linked the blog post in the show description, but the post can also be found on Heidi's website, pinned in the top menu. If you're looking to give dictation a try, definitely take a moment to read it. It's totally worth it. And while we're on the topic of the show description, links to connect with Heidi and buy her books are listed there too. I do use some Amazon affiliate links, so if you buy through the link, it helps the podcast and is always appreciated. We did discuss the dictation course that will be offered in September of 2023. And if you want to hear exactly when the class is available, Heidi confirmed that you can join her newsletter. She does include snippets about dictation in the newsletter, so it won't revolve solely on books. You can sign up by visiting her website. With that said, let's jump right in. Welcome, inspirational romance author Heidi McCahan. Yay!
Yay! Thank you for having me, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here.
So in case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
Sure. I'm originally from Alaska. I currently live outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been married for 21 years. I'm a mother of 3 teenage boys, and I have been writing for a long time. I've wanted to be a writer since I was a little girl, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that journey as we go, but currently I write for Love Inspired, which is Harlequin's faith-based line of romance novels.
And I know you just recently released One Southern Summer, speaking of which, with Harlequin's Love Inspired line. Congrats.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Brand new book, cool. Baby.
Oh, I know. Those are so exciting. And which one is this in the line? How many have you written total?
Okay, so for Love Inspired, I have written several contemporary romance, and we call them category romance because they're only about 212 pages. It's a mass market paperback. But One Southern Summer is part of their new trade line, and that means it's what we would call like the regular book length. It's closer to 400 pages, and my book has 3 points of view, a female, a male, and then a grandmother. And we are calling it women's fiction because it's more about the woman's journey as the protagonist, and then also her relationships with her mother and her sisters and her grandmother. Of course, there's a romance because it's Harlequin, but other trade books are Amish and thriller, and there's other women's fiction novels besides my own. I don't want to say it's brand new, but relatively, and they only do about 8 a year in the trade line versus the mass market paperbacks have 12 titles a month. So as you can see, that's a big difference.
It is. And I'm glad you make the distinction between it, because I know when I was looking at the Love Inspired line on Harlequin's website, yours was in there too, but then like you said, there was like Amish and then other types of like different kind of lines. So that's really interesting to note, because I remember when I was a lot younger, Love Inspired was actually the first line I ever read that was romance related. So
yes, I think it's about 25 years old, and then Harlequin overall is about to celebrate its 75th birthday. So Harlequin has something for everyone. Love Inspired is faith-based and for a more conservative audience, I would say.
I love that. I love, though, that we include all romance. I love that Harlequin does that.
Oh, for sure. They have something for every romance reader, and I love that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you had a really unique way of coming into becoming a Harlequin romance author, didn't you?
I did. Thanks for asking. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. It's kind of my favorite thing, but I wanted to be a writer, like I said. And so I started out as what I would call a mommy blogger in like 2006, 2007. A lot of us were home with kids and we were blogging about our experience of motherhood. And for some people that became just a tremendous platform. And some of those bloggers are still around today, but it was not meant to be for me. And I started trying to write my first novel. And then Harlequin has a lot of contests. And so in 2012, I pitched, it was like a virtual chat room, basically. I just said a couple of teaser lines about my book. And Emily was the editor at the time, and she wrote back, "This sounds good, but not quite what we're looking for. But let me just take a look at it." And so she read the whole thing, and she was like, "Not quite what we're looking for. Do you have anything else?" And I was so offended. I'm like, "No. Do you know how hard it is to write one book? I don't have any extras lying around." And she was like, "Well, keep trying, keep trying." And so I did, and I was published by a small press, and then they closed their doors, and so that became an indie book. And I did a couple more independent titles while I was still trying to get in the door with Harlequin. And then finally 2015 or 16, I entered a contest again, and I didn't win, but Shayna, my editor, was willing to work with me and revise and revise and revise. I think we went through 4 rounds of revisions before she was like, "Okay, you're there. I can now offer you a contract." That was The Firefighters Twins, and I think it came out in 2018, and I've been writing for Harlequin ever since. So, woo, there you go.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good condensed version of your whole trail as an author. And you know what? The blog may not have worked out in the beginning, but it kind of paid off in the end, right?
It did. And it taught me to write for an audience of one, because I would write those blog posts for my grandmother who was elderly and lived in another state. And that's kind of how you have to start out when you're writing your novels. You want your book to be for the whole wide world, but it just is not. Your romance novel is for a particular kind of reader. And so I sort of took my blogging skills and figured out how to transfer those into writing a novel.
You know, that's something that I had to learn actually, like, and I've learned a lot through talking with other people on the podcast, is that a lot of times, like, we say we all want our books to be read by everybody, right? But then we're like, oh, but do we really?
No, you really don't, because that's how you get 1-star reviews. But and the structure of a romance novel is it appeals to a certain reader. And that doesn't mean that romance writers don't read thrillers or memoir or lots of other cozy mysteries, but a romance novel has to have a particular structure.
Exactly, exactly. And the people who are going to love your book are really going to love your book, as opposed to like most, if it goes wide with the public, and then there may be, like you said, the 1-star reviews. So you just want to find the people that really would love your novel. Like you said, that audience of one. So
yes. Now I'm going to be a hypocrite and say I want my mass market paperback readers to try my women's fiction, because there are elements of who I am as a writer which carry over into that larger, more complex novel. But I understand that not everyone will, and that's okay.
Well, you know what? And that's kind of what I've been doing as far as my integrating of that's why I've been integrating more women's fiction and cozy mystery actually into my podcast recently, is because I found that there's a lot of overlap with the readers, because there is elements of that romance in there. It spotlights different relationships too within the book, but the romance is still there. Yeah, I know. I love kind of looking at women's fiction because there is usually the subplot of the romance in there. So like, I will ask though, for you, since you are a romance writer and you do a little dabble in a little bit of women's fiction too, is writing the romance look a little different for you when you're approaching it?
So I sell a concept or an idea for a book to love inspired in terms of the romance. So we have agreed that this is what this book is going to be about, and this is how it's going to fit into an overarching series. So when I first started out, I could write one book because we had one publishing contract for one concept, and I would write the whole thing. But now I've sort of graduated to being a more seasoned author. So I sell a book on 3 chapters and a plot summary, and then attached to that, I have ideas for additional books, and those are usually just a couple of paragraphs. And so I'm fortunate that I can sell those concepts as future books. And so then when we get to that book, it's like 3 chapters and a plot summary. Okay, this looks good. Keep going. Does that make sense? And so I know what to do. It's going over to the women's fiction side that I didn't really know what to do. And when it came time to add 25,000 words, and oh, by the way, we need it to be a little less romancy, and we really need more scenes with the female protagonist and her mom and her sisters. That's where I struggled.
And see, and that's always unique to me. Like you face unique challenges depending on which genre you're going into.
Yes, and I have no idea how to write a cozy mystery, so
I got an episode for that. Don't worry.
All right,
I
will have to go listen. As I'm like, what? I know what it is, but I don't. I like to read them, but I would not know how.
I know it's super interesting to me. So since you say you usually sell your
books, like kind of with like 3 chapters and kind of like the trajectory of where you're going to go. Like many authors like me are kind of always looking for hacks to kind of write faster and like get our thoughts on paper. And I imagine if you're going to sell your book, you got to get your thoughts on paper pretty quickly.
Yes.
So you found a really interesting way around that. And you kind of brought it to me and said you use dictation. So how did you get started using dictation and how long have you been using it to write?
So in 2019, that's the last time I think I went to a big national writers conference, like in person. It was Romance Writers of America. It was in New York City. And I went in and listened to some authors. They were on a panel. I think there was 4, and they were all talking about how they use dictation to get their writing done quickly. And I was like, well, that's amazing. I hope someday, I'll be able to write more than 1 book a year. And I wonder how I would do that. And they had all had something happen in their life that required them to try dictation, like their job changed. And so they had a long commute and they felt like they could dictate while they were driving, or a child was sick. And so they changed their schedule to accommodate the child, or they had a health condition of their own, a couple of concussions. So, they couldn't have a lot of screen time, but they could still dictate. I was like, wow, well, I'll pass on the injuries and the health challenges, but I would like to learn dictation. Well, I had no idea what was coming, right? Like 6 months after that conference, we were in the midst of a pandemic. So everybody's home, including my husband's working from home. 3 kids are home, dog, me. And so I'm out on my screen porch. I'm like whispering my story ideas into my phone. I was very self-conscious. I don't know why, because it's a pandemic. Who cares what you're doing on your porch? But I was embarrassed about talking out loud and thinking that anyone would hear me. And so I was very self-conscious, very unsure, but I thought, I'm going to try this dictation thing. And then as the kids went back to school, I would sit in the car rider line and I would talk into my phone for like 5 or 10 minutes. And then a lot of times at first it's nonsense. So I want to be clear about that. I was not a perfect dictator. I was a frustrated, confused person trying to use dictation at first. So I just tried it because I felt like it was necessary, and I couldn't imagine writing more than 1 book a year typing at my computer. That just seemed like it wouldn't work with my mom life, and it seemed overwhelming. That's how I started.
Well, and you know what? That was actually one question I thought of, was when you kind of brought the topic to me, was like, I wonder if she feels a little strange because, when I first, See,
very strange.
Exactly. I was wondering that because then I was like pretty sure I was like, I bet she felt as strange as I did at the first when I started doing my podcast episodes, because you're just kind of speaking out to the ether and like,
right.
There's nothing there. And if you're recording yourself, I can only imagine. And I was wondering specifically about romance and like, especially you have 3 boys. So like, and if your husband's home, you're just kind of like, okay, how weird do I feel like talking about these?
Yes, ideas? I don't compose the kissing scenes when they're around.
Good idea. I like that. That's a good tip to have. So.
Or any kind of significantly emotional scene. Not every scene that you write has lots of drama and angst and emotion, but if I do need to write one of those scenes, I still try to do that alone.
But I know that I'm always looking for like better ways to kind of streamline my process, because I'm a foster mom. So like I'm always going and blowing, usually with therapies or appointments of some sort. So I'm always trying to get in a little bit extra writing time, and I'm trying to find that. And dictation seems like that is a great way to do that.
I think it's great. I share it from a place of wanting to be helpful and not from a place of, whoa, look at how amazing I am. I can write so many words. But in mass market paperback, in the industry, readers are voracious. You want to feed them. You want to give them the books that they're looking for. And I'm not the type of writer that gets an advance that you could live on with just 1 book. You have to produce multiple books a year if you want to earn a living. And then you want the royalties, the earnings from those book sales as well. So for me, someone else taught me about dictation at a conference, so I'm sharing it forward with other people. I do teach a course online about it as a way to also supplement my income as an author. And for me, it really changed my life, because sitting here at the laptop, it's not good to be that sedentary. It's not good for me. It takes a long time to write a book. And if I can walk outside for a few minutes or just get up and walk around my house, I dictate more inside my house than I do out on a walking trail. For sure. But if you can just get up and walk around for 5 minutes, 5 minutes for me might be 500 to 700 words versus 5 minutes at my computer, I'm just too tempted to delete. That internal critic that lives inside my head that tells me that sentence is really lousy. Who do you think you are? Well, that voice is silenced when I'm talking. I can tell myself the story into my app, and that cruel internal critic doesn't get to have a voice.
I like that you say that because yeah, sometimes we get into our own heads and then we're just like, oh, that's terrible. Just erase all that. And then you think to yourself, man, I should have kept that. I kind of actually wish I had. And I feel like my phone is always close by. So like, if nothing else, I can dictate into my phone because I have this wild idea and I have nowhere, like, of course I'm missing a pen, even though I have like 12 in my purse. I know, but they're at the bottom.
Oh, for sure.
You know, as being a mom, you know that. So like, they're always everywhere. And I always feel like we get our best ideas, you know, it always seems like in the shower or at night, you know, right before bed. So that feels like that would be such an easy way to grab my phone and just whisper into it real quick. Okay, here's a couple of lines for this chapter or something.
Yes. And you can record it in an app that will take the words, like you could watch the words appear on your phone screen as you're speaking them, like Otter is an app that does that. Or you can record an audio file, and then the audio file will need to be uploaded to an online service. I prefer that because then I can't see the words on the screen, but that's just a hot tip. Some people really want to see those words come out on the screen so that they know it's actually happening versus I like to record the audio file and then I'm pretty sure it's AI. There's no human taking my transcription for me, and let the robot do the work. And then you can look at it and read it. And then it becomes a Word file and you can just paste it into your Word document. That's how I like to do it. But there's no one perfect way to dictate. There's no one right way, but the technology is there and it's always, always improving. So I think it's a great option.
Well, and I love that you mentioned earlier that was a good way to like get out more than one book a year because like you said, readers are voracious. And I've talked to a couple of romance authors who said like, oh yeah, I only get out one book a year. And I'm just like, man, one book a year seems amazing. But
one book a year is amazing. Yeah. I don't want to belittle anybody because writing one book in your whole life is a fabulous accomplishment, but try writing two.
Exactly. But I know too in the like, especially in the romance genre, there's just such fast turnover and there's just like people are just moving, readers are moving at like lightning speed. So it's really helpful, especially as a, romance writer specifically, if you want to put out like several books, like within a period of a year. So,
yes. And some people would say on the indie side of things that it would be better if you had more than one book to put out, because sometimes if you have the money and the time to write like a 3-book series and get it edited and get great covers and learn how to put the product out on the marketplace, some people say it's better if you have a second and a third book so that the readers can go ahead and just blow through all those. I know that might sound overwhelming, but a single standalone title in the indie market, people might feel a little bit disappointed about how it's received because readers are like, oh, new author with only one book. Well, I'll just wait and see what else is out there. So
that's fair, especially if it's part of a series. Sometimes it's hard to get readers invested in that until you kind of come out with a whole series. So how many books a year do you write with dictation?
So last year would be 2022. I wrote 160,000 words that I kept track of. So there were other words in there that I probably didn't log. And this year I've been less. You can really sort of obsess over those numbers, and I don't think that's healthy for me. So I know that I have to have deadlines because we agreed on them and I signed contracts. So I'm locked in on those dates. So this year I will write 2 books and I'll start a third. I probably won't write a third book because the year's half over. So I'll write 2. So nice. I'll write 100,000 words and then I'll probably get another 25,000 out. And then that's a good pace for me this year.
Hey, that's awesome. You got 3 boys. You're staying busy. I understand that.
That's right.
So there are obviously great benefits for like busy moms like us to hit that word count and try to make the most of our quiet, productive time. Since you've been using it, are there any additional benefits that you found to using dictation and how writers can utilize it?
So I come from an exercise science background. I used to be an athletic trainer at a university and stopped doing that to raise 3 kids. So I still lean on what I learned, back in the day. And that is we should be moving our bodies as much as we can. And dictation does it does get you out of your chair. You might not be brave enough to go outside and walk and talk, or you might not even live in a situation where that's safe or practical. But if you can get outside and work up the courage to tell yourself the story while you're walking in a safe place, there is something about being creative and being out in nature. And there are authors who go on long, like 6-mile hikes while dictating. I don't think I could pull that off, but there is for sure a connection between nature and dictating. But if people aren't interested in that, I feel like dictating helps me get to the emotional level of my characters a little easier than if I was handwriting or typing on my laptop. Dictation for me takes away a little bit of a barrier. I don't know if it's necessarily that cruel critic that we were talking about earlier, but for me, I can just really get inside the skin and the head of my character, and that helps me write a better book.
I could see that. I could see because I used to know an author who would do that too. He actually dictated a lot of his books and he did sci-fi. And he came out with quite a few books within a year, I want to say. And it was a series. So readers really wanted more and he wanted to create them faster. And that was what really worked for him. But it felt like he really got those characters. Like he really nailed them because he was able to dictate. That's what it kind of like, because I read some of his work and it was really great. And he did have like a female in there and he really, and sometimes it's hard to write the opposite sex. He really got into the head of that character job. And I feel like you're right. There's just something about dictation that helps us kind of get in, like create the character a little more vividly.
I think so. And who's to say, are my books getting better because I'm practicing? And do I have more confidence because I'm selling more books now in year 10 than I did in year 1? You can't really quantify it, but dictating for me puts a lot more joy into the process. And I think that comes out onto the page. I mean, I'm writing uplifting, inspirational stories. So I want people to enjoy a happy ending. I want them to finish the book feeling satisfied and full of hope. So if dictating helps me get there, then I'm in.
I believe you mentioned using dictation to write your latest novel, One Southern Summer, right?
Yes, that's true.
So how has dictation impacted your overall writing process? And does it look different than it did before?
Yes. So to be honest, I wrote One Southern Summer using almost every method possible because I got the idea years ago. And then I was like, I don't think I'm ready to write this. This seems like a pretty complex book. And then I would go to writing conferences and I would tell my friends about it. So 2016, 2017, 2018, I'm telling them and they're like, write the book, you should write the book. I'm like, oh no, but I can't. It's too hard. And I would try to pitch the concept in person at conferences. Sometimes you can get a few minutes with an editor and they would be like, not really sure what you've got going on there. So I would try handwriting. I would try typing into Word. And then I had to expand the novel to get it to be trade length, over 90,000 words. And so I used dictation for that part. So that's like the last third of the novel. And to be honest, I moved into a hotel for a weekend because it was crunch time and I just needed to really focus. And like I said before, I didn't know exactly how to write women's fiction. And we had agreed on a plot summary and I had a pretty solid start, but I just needed a lot of rewriting. And I'm really thankful for my editor at Love Inspired who was willing to help me sort of hone my focus and help me see what I needed to do. So now I'm more confident as a writer in what I need to do for standard contemporary romance novels. So I can write a pretty decent draft in about 12 weeks, which I used to spend 7 to 9 months on a manuscript. So I think I'm more confident. I've sold more books. I know what's expected of me. I come up with the idea, so I'm excited about it. But there's something about somebody saying, yep, sold, we want that. That really helps you versus when I was first getting started, I was like, I wonder what kind of book they're looking for. And now I know.
Well, and that brings up a really interesting question. So when you do edits, do you use dictation during edits as well?
If I needed to rewrite a whole scene, or if she would say, hey, I feel like there's something missing here. I feel like we could really use a scene from the hero's point of view, then I would probably make some notes, pen and paper, outline what I wanted to have in the scene, and then I would probably dictate it. But in the editorial process, for me, it's a lot of, hey, you've used the word shrugged. Your characters are shrugging 97 times. Let's work on that. Or I just got an editorial note today that said, I just wanted to point out that everybody's wearing green pants a green shirt and white pants. I was like, well, that's weird. We can't have every female character wearing the same outfit. I'm really into green shirts and white pants, apparently. So, editorial for me is a little more like polishing and going a little deeper emotionally. So I keep dictation for mostly my rough draft.
Do you use it? Do you usually go into it with an outline of some sort? Kind of, because my thoughts kind of wander wild and free out there.
Yes. So for a love-inspired contemporary romance novel, you need to have the hero and heroine together as much as possible, because if it's only 212 pages and they're going to be either engaged or sometimes even married by the end, to make it a plausible romance, they really need to spend a lot of time together. And so the structure of the novel is built around, okay, how are they going to be together? So sometimes she is providing childcare. Sometimes he is going to teach her child how to ride a horse. I'm just coming up with ideas off the top of my head, but usually there are some tried and true things that love-inspired readers really like. Small towns, single dads, twins, triplets, Christmas, anytime a young child needs some sort of care, foster care, adoption, those are all things that readers really like. So you try to work in as many ideas, hooks, tropes that you think will sell the concept to the editorial, and then I go from there. So I start out brainstorming, and then I go one paragraph, and then I expand it into usually about a page and a half of a plot summary. And then if it sells, then off we go.
That sounds like you really honed that process. Like you've kind of really figured that out over the last couple of years.
Yes.
So
but I haven't figured it out for women's fiction. So my follow-up idea to One Southern Summer was a dud. So I'm still learning there. I have a ways to go until I find my next idea that sells. So it's not always sunshine and roses. Rejection is part of the writing process.
True. And that might not be the right idea for right now.
True.
So
yes,
I know that a lot of people have said that too before. I've talked to a couple of authors who'd be like, it's a great idea, but maybe not for right now, maybe later down the line.
Right. So, I told myself today, 2016 version of you wouldn't have been able to write One Southern Summer. So it's coming out exactly when it's supposed to. It didn't feel like it in the process. It felt like this is taking forever, but it's coming out at exactly the right time. And I had the skills when I needed them to write the book that I wouldn't have had 7 years ago.
Me and a girlfriend were actually talking about that. She's an author as well. And we were talking about I think it was maybe Stephen King's On Writing. He'd mentioned like having a tool belt, like having your author toolkit, and that adding every time like you get a rejection or every time you're building when you're writing more, you're building that author toolkit out. And the more you do that, the more tools you have at your disposal, and that you can actually write better. Yeah. And she had mentioned that writing all these other books, or all her other writing, has led up to her writing this one specific book that really took an emotional toll, and just throughout the journey. So those things are important.
For sure. I used to cry when I would get a rejection, and then I would be angry, and then I wouldn't want to write. I mean, it would take me a week, sometimes 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks to get back to being willing to try writing again. Now I get a rejection, I'm like, okay, I'm probably done for today. And maybe tomorrow it'll be a little bit tough, but it's not really personal. When you think about, okay, rejection means that idea would not sell in the current market as best as they can tell. They're professionals. That is their educated opinion. Yes, it's just an opinion, but it's not a personal attack. And you don't want to write a book that nobody's excited about. Exactly. And you don't want to put a book out in the marketplace a year to 18 months from now that people are like, what's that? That's crushing. So absorb the pain of your rejected idea now, and then try to come up with something else. That's easier said than done.
But with the help, like you said, kind of dictation, we might be able to create several books so that we might have more ideas that we can work on in the meantime while we're trying to work that one book.
Right. So if an editor ever says, no, thank you, but do you have anything else? You can say, yes. Yes, I do.
Of course I do. Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking,
I have a whole stack.
I'm so glad you asked. So Technology has created so many great tools and avenues to make writing faster and easier than ever. I mean, goodness, you mentioned it, AI. I utilize some AI stuff for like transcripting for my show, actually. So, like, we have the accessibility of phones and microphones and all kinds of software. What kind of tools do you use for dictation? And what are some of the best practices you recommend?
Learning dictation, it does require patience and practice. Just like I'm not a good swimmer. So if I decided I was going to do a triathlon, I wouldn't be able to do the swim portion. I would have to practice and practice. I wouldn't be able to do a triathlon at all, quite frankly. But, I would need to practice all elements of that epic athletic event. Dictation is like that. Your first sentences out of your mouth are going to be nonsense. You're going to be speaking clearly, but they're going to come onto the app or they're going to be recorded in an audio file as nonsense until the AI gets used to your voice and the way that you end sentences. And it won't be long before AI just knows, oh, she wants to put a period there, or he wants to frame that as a question. And so the technology is amazing. So I like to use Evernote. I've used it forever as a tool to keep notes. That's what it's designed to do. But I record my audio file. And then right now I use Happy Scribe, which is a transcription service. There are many out there. Otter is super smart. It's for Android or Apple users, and Otter does the exact same thing. You don't have to spend a lot of money. If you have a smartphone, you can start using dictation. Laptops, whether you're an Apple user or have a PC, they want people to be able to have a voice activated system. And so dictating into Word is possible. That has also improved. People often ask me if they can dictate into Scrivener. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. I think it would be better to just dictate and then paste your transcription into your Scrivener if you have Scrivener users in your audience. So those are my tools. It just requires a lot of practice and a willingness to succeed, and sort of a forward thinking vision that I can do this and this will benefit me in the long run.
Well, and I imagine it took a little while to kind of get a handle on like how you were going to, how like feeling comfortable with the dictation, right? And how you wanted to approach it. So how long did it kind of take for you? I imagine for me, it would take like at least 60 to 90 days, easy.
Oh, for sure. And I don't think you would want to try it every day. Maybe if you're a real go-getter. And sometimes you're like, I want to return to what I feel confident doing so I can get some words down. So I think maybe try talking for 2 minutes and see what you get. And then the next time try talking for 3 minutes. And even now I still go in about 5 to 8 minute word, if you want to call it a sprint. I'm not sprinting in the sense that I'm not talking fast, but it's focused, intense work. It's one scene, talking it through. And then I would say it took me 2 years of trying and going back to the laptop and writing, just typing in Word. And then I decided I wanted to teach an online course for dictation. And so I was confident enough to do that. I built that course the previous winter and launched it this spring. So it took me a couple of years of really working at it to feel confident enough that I could teach it to other people.
Nice. And is that course still available? Are you still running that course, or?
I am a student of Amy Porterfield. She teaches online marketing made easy. Her whole platform is about growing your email subscriber list, your newsletter list, and then also taking that list and turning it into an online course if you want to. And so she teaches us to launch your course multiple times before you make it evergreen, meaning always available. So I launched it once in the spring, and I'll launch it again in the fall, in September. So if people want to know about that, they can go to my website, and there's some information right at the top. And for now, I'm just going to launch it twice a year. And then if I decide I want it to go evergreen, we'll see. I'm kind of waiting to see where technology goes. I hope dictation and what I'm teaching in my course is still relevant. But when you're teaching about tools, you have to be careful that you don't launch a course that's not really relevant anymore. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. AI has really changed the game for a lot of things, and you just want to make sure that that's kind of up to par, because I've done the same thing.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to record a course and make the lessons accessible. And even though the content is all there, I want to be available for my students, so I have to balance that with what else I'm doing in my writing life and my family life. So I'm going to have it available again in the fall. So after Labor Day.
Awesome. So so you walk through the course basically and kind of teaches you how to do like the dictation if you don't feel comfortable trying doing it on your own.
Yes. Oh, people can definitely learn on their own. There are so many free resources. I just was getting some questions from my writer friends. And honestly, my writer friends were my first students. So I'm ready to branch out and take on some strangers, if you will, and teach more writers. But you can certainly teach yourself if you want to. I just give people some exercises and some options. And it ended up being a lot of encouragement, a lot of pep talks. Like, don't get mad. Don't throw your phone. You can do this.
Well, yeah. And that's what I figured it was. That's why I was wondering how long it took you. Cause I only imagine like it took me a solid at least a year or maybe a year and a couple of months just to get comfortable with the podcast, just talking on a microphone and maybe talking either to myself or to someone else. So I imagine sitting there with my phone. It'd take me a little bit to get comfy.
It's easy, but it really is a shift in your creative process. And, we don't like change as humans. Well, what if this doesn't work? Or why can't I just keep doing what I was doing before? For me, I was starting to have pain, like pain in my hands, pain in my hips. So if you start to hurt, you tend to stop doing something. So for me, I was like, I need to get out of this chair.
And that's great motivation. Mine is like probably the carpal tunnel that I can tell is probably trying to set in nowadays. So
right. Yeah, we have to be good to our hands. We need them.
Exactly. And anything that allows me to go walk around or pet the dog while I'm kind of like just talking into my phone, I am all for. So
sure. Well, if you know that you could dictate something in 20 minutes, that's a little easier to fit into your life. Or for folks who do a lot of caregiving, children, elderly parents, whatever, if you could just like, okay, 30 minutes and I could get this scene down versus if you were going to handwrite a scene, you probably would need more than 30 minutes. Or for me, if I'm going to type a scene, I could spend all day typing one scene. And that's not very efficient for where I am in my current stage.
whenever you go into like, because I know sometimes I ramble a little bit if I want to try to talk into my phone, would you suggest like naming certain things so you don't forget what that part of the story is?
Yes, people who also teach dictation say to put a word, identify the word before you start the project. And that's the word that you're going to say when you know that you're going to have to edit. Like maybe you have a word in your podcast life that you're like, okay, here's where I'm going to put the code word that I know I need to come edit this here. So like some people do something silly like whoopsie daisy. So just say to yourself, whoopsie daisy. And then that's the word you'll go and look for later in the transcript. And you'll be like, okay, that's where I know I really need to edit. I usually just say to myself, hey, author, that's the wrong name because I have too many characters going at once. Like, hey, author's note, you're calling him Wyatt. That's the wrong book. It's Levi, remember? Like I just leave a little note to myself and then go back and fix it later.
That's very much I work with audiobooks too, and a lot of times they'll snap if they make a mistake.
Oh, okay.
So that you can see like as an editor, you can see like that big old bump and you're like, oh, that definitely needs to be edited.
Right. Or in publishing, they sometimes put the initials T and K in brackets, and that's some kind of publishing code for there's more information coming in the future. But if I put TK in brackets in my manuscript, I would be like, what? So for me, I usually just in dictation, I just tell myself, hey, author's note, you need to come back and research this. Or
nice. That's really good. Well, we've learned all about dictation today. You have given us some great tips and tricks. And hopefully, if people are interested, I will let them remind everyone that in September of 2023, your online course will be available. And and so where can listeners find your book and how can they connect with you?
My books are available pretty much wherever books are sold, ebook and paperback. I do have a couple of audio from my independently published titles, and I am at HeidiMcCahan.com. And I would love it if folks would subscribe to my newsletter. It's super easy. There's a sign up box on the right side of the website.
Thanks so much to Heidi for joining the show. Be sure to follow me on social media at Romance the Story. That way you can keep up with new and prior guests as well as episodes to come. And if you're enjoying the show, please follow, share, or leave a review. It greatly helps the podcast. Book recommendations for this episode: The Firefighter's Twins by Heidi McCahan and One Southern Summer by Heidi McCahan. As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing.